Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michelle Jansen, and I'm going to lead us in the pledge and then welcome my own daughters up here to sing our national anthem. So let's start with the pledge. Everyone could rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And now we'll have our national anthem.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave.
We just wanted to make a couple of announcements before we get started. Wow, that's bad. We have a couple of our sponsors that we want to thank. First one is South Mountain Firearms from Shippensburg. We have Chet Shank. And I ask that you would support him as he's supporting all of us. Please visit his business, visit his table, and talk to him and show him your appreciation, please. We also have South End Car Clinic from Waynesboro. That's owned by Doug Shetron. Please wave. Doug is also a member of the 912, and he's also, I call him the head of our Second Amendment Committee. He won't take that, but I'm making him that anyway. We have a lot of, I'm sorry, I forgot Debbie back there. Debbie Taylor's back here from the Franklin County Republican Women. She does everything. She's with the state and all that. She has a voter registration table. And I ask, if you are not registered to vote, please stop and see Debbie on your way out of here, please. That's one way that you can make a huge difference, and you still have time to do that before the primary. So please stop by and see. I also want to thank the county commissioners who have allowed us to use this plaza. The Borough of Chambersburg, who's cooperated tremendously with us to put this on, and I just want to appreciate all of those people. They could have made our lives difficult. They didn't. They made it very easy, so I appreciate that. I want to thank all the volunteers from the 912 who've worked tirelessly to this event. This wonderful stage was built by Doug Shetron. If you'd see this, it has water tables and everything else, and it's fantastic. So I want to thank Doug for that. He put a lot of time and effort into that, as did a lot of our volunteers, so we appreciate that. I would also invite you to stop at our 912 table. We have fantastic information there. Pennsylvania constitutions, books with all the gun laws of Pennsylvania. So please stop by there. You can sign our mailing list and we'll send you information about all of our meetings, events we have coming up. We'll keep you notified of what's going on. So please stop by there and check out what's going on there. We also have a donation bucket. If you feel so inclined to help us to pay for this event, that would be wonderful. We certainly would be appreciated. The final thing before we get on to the speakers, Sheriff Dane Anthony from here in Franklin County could not be here at this event, but he felt it was really important that he send a message to us, and he's asked us to read it for you, which I will do. It says, "To all, I want to assure each and every one of you that I am totally against any ban on weapons for law-abiding citizens. The Second Amendment reads, and I quote, 'The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.' I need the citizens of Franklin County to understand that I raised my right hand and swore under oath to support, obey, and defend the Constitution of the United States, and that is exactly what I and my deputies intend to do. Thank you for your concern, Dane Anthony." So I greatly appreciate him sending that to us. If you haven't had a chance to do it, we have a letter over here that we're going to present to Dane Anthony. We'd like you to put your name on there saying thank you for standing for the people of Franklin County. So please see that you do that before you leave as well, okay? We'd like to introduce Mary Burkholder. She's going to introduce our first speaker, and we will get on with things.
Way to go, guys. We got some good stuff here. My name is Mary Burkholder, and I'm a member of 912, and I'm here to introduce our first speaker, Jim Taylor. Jim Taylor was born and raised in Philadelphia. He's a graduate of Swarthmore College and a Vietnam vet, having served as a Chinese linguist in the Air Force. Jim was Eastern Director of the Intercollegiate Studies Institute, Director of Public Relations for the National Right to Work Legal Defense Foundation, and Executive Director of Young America's Foundation, which manages the Reagan Ranch in Santa Barbara, California. Jim currently resides in Greencastle, Pennsylvania, and is an editor of the Tea Party Press of South Central PA. He is also former chairman of the Franklin County Republican Party. Please give a warm welcome to Jim. Thank you.
Good morning, free Americans. For today, show me your guns. Not enough. I'm sure some of you are packing. But, I want to thank the 912 Patriots for putting this program on. The 912 Patriots are putting on some of the best programs in Franklin County, informing citizens of danger to their freedoms. If you can join that organization, I urge you to do so. They meet once a month, and they would welcome your involvement. So please consider that. Barbara said we have a registration table, not just to register, but to change your registration if you want to. And I also want to extol the work of Gun Owners of America, whose leader you will hear from shortly. It's a hardcore group defending your rights to the bone. They also deserve your support and your involvement. I've been asked to talk about something about the history of the right to keep and bear arms. The fact that we're meeting in Franklin County is very appropriate. Just 13 miles down this road on Route 30, you can visit the reconstruction of Fort Loudon. Those of you from this area, some of you already know this story. But, and you know that during the French and Indian Wars, the raiding parties swept through this area, almost depopulated it in the 1750s. This area went from a population of 5,000 to about 1,000 in a couple of years. 1,200 people were murdered or carried off. Hundreds more fled east. But by the time of the end of the French and Indian War, every settler on this frontier was armed. Many of them had not been, because they came from Europe, where they were either not allowed to own guns, or they were not allowed to hunt and therefore did not need guns. But by the end of the French and Indian War, they were all armed. And they were very concerned about further Indian raids. But at that time, there were businessmen in Philadelphia who were sending pack trains of mules loaded with guns and ammunition and whiskey to sell to the Indians on the Ohio. And the settlers here learned about that and complained to the British government, which refused to do anything about it. So they intercepted those pack trains and offloaded the merchandise and set it on fire. That's when the British acted. They came out here to Fort Loudon and set up to protect the pack trains, which were violating the law. In other words, the British were breaking the law. And they also began to arrest settlers who they believed had been involved in intercepting the pack trains and taking them to Fort Loudon for trial and confiscating their weapons. The settlers got together and captured a number of British soldiers, who they then took to Fort Loudon and exchanged for the American prisoners. But the British refused to give back the guns. The settlers then laid siege for 3 days, firing round the clock on the fort. And at the end of 3 days, the British surrendered and gave back the guns and marched back to Philadelphia. That was 1765, 10 years before Lexington and Concord. So the fight for the right to keep and bear arms began here in Franklin County 10 years before the American Revolution. And if we had not had armed citizens in Massachusetts, there would not have been a Lexington and Concord. It would have been very difficult to mount a resistance to the British. And when the Founding Fathers established the Constitution, they realized that. The men who founded the Constitution were a revolutionary generation. And they not only believed they had done the right thing by freeing themselves of Britain, but they wanted the people to be armed, not just for the future of the country and national defense, but to possibly defend themselves against the government and its agents. And that was 200 years ago. Some people say that we no longer need that. We no longer need to defend ourselves from the government. I think you all know different from that. You can see what's happening in the world and here in this country. The European Union just gave Cyprus the permission to go into people's bank accounts and steal their personal money to cover their deficit. And if it's happening in Cyprus, it could happen in the rest of Europe, and it could happen here, because a lot of people in power in this country look to Europe for examples of what to do here. So, keeping armed is critical. When there's social and political upheaval, there's no 2-year warning. You wake up and it's there. It comes in a rush. I mean, don't go into an Obama future unarmed. Get yourself a gun. Stay free. God bless you all for being here. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim, for the history. Every one of you out here represents millions of people who stand with us with the rights to bear arms. You're all representatives of people across this land that hold these rights dear to their hearts. With that, I'd like to introduce our next speaker. It's J.C. Dodge. J.C.'s worked with law enforcement for over 15 years and security for 24. And he did 14 years in the military with combat service in Iraq. He started Mason-Dixon Tactical on July 4th, 2010, to help others prepare for the future and to learn to be more confident and self-reliant. With that, please give a warm welcome to J.C. Dodge.
Wow, this is awesome to see. Everybody else is on the same sheet of music. That's unusual. That's something everybody needs to keep in mind. You're not alone. You are not alone. Everybody who's standing next to you understands that. I'm going to make a statement right before I start the main part of my speech, just so everybody understands where I'm coming from. I am unapologetic about being a gun owner who is not afraid to use them in the defense of life and liberty. I am unapologetic about my belief in God and being a Christian. I guess that means I'm clinging to my guns and my Bible. Cling away. Amen. Amen. I am unapologetic about being a combat veteran of these United States. I am unapologetic about being a white man who has never done anything to inhibit the freedom of others and has always strived as a soldier to help them be free. I am unapologetic about judging a man by the content of his character, not the color of his skin or his ethnic background. And finally, I am unapologetic about being willing to die, promoting and defending the freedoms that our forefathers fought and died for. Friends, neighbors, patriots, we live in interesting times indeed. From outside our great republic, the enemies of that republic want to destroy the great experiment that we have. From within, we have a Congress, and to a greater extent, an administration that conspires with and equips the proven and professed enemies of our country. Time and time again, our leaders tell us that they need just a little more of our freedom to be able to secure us from whatever. But who's going to secure us from us? Secure them, secure us. I'll tell you who's going to secure us. That's patriots in the U.S. Constitution. Patriots have been called a lot of things over the years, most recently terrorists, racists, by a media that is willing to alter or delete portions of video or audio to make you come to a particular conclusion that is patently wrong. Founding fathers have been called terrorists by people that are training our law enforcement community and our children. If that is a term that they use to call our founding fathers, then everyone should strive to meet that label. Founding fathers put together two documents unique in the history of the world. The U.S. Constitution, to include the Bill of Rights, and the Declaration of Independence stand alone as premier statements of our God-given inalienable rights through the ages. As such, the enemies of freedom and justice must remove or invalidate these declarations before they can proceed with their plan to control and dominate the world. There is a reason this administration has worked so hard to negate our national sovereignty. They believe that if they negate our national sovereignty, that our state sovereignty and individual sovereignty will go right out the window. These are the two primary reasons for our Bill of Rights: our individual sovereignty and our state sovereignty. You don't see anything in the Bill of Rights about national sovereignty. I hear a lot of people talk about their constitutional rights, but they really do not understand. These are not constitutional rights. These are inalienable rights given to us by God. The reason they are in the Bill of Rights is our founding fathers realized that they needed to codify these inalienable rights to make sure we understood that they knew we had them. They didn't come up with them. They didn't come up with our inalienable rights. They just wanted to make sure they were there, and they were written down so everyone knew. That was the purpose of the Bill of Rights. A privilege is something that is given to you by an individual or a group, and it can be taken away from you at a whim. An inalienable right is something that you are born with. And the only way an individual or group can take it away from you is by the use of force or you giving it up. This is what they have continually done to us through the decades, under the auspices of being more secure from the enemy, no matter what the enemy was. The Patriot Act is an example of one of the most draconian measures our government has ever used to take away our rights. All the Patriot Act has done is make it easier for the feds to legally violate your rights. That's all it's done. How many terrorists have you heard about that were caught because of the Patriot Act? How many times do you hear of people being violated by TSA, by their Viper checkpoints where they stop you, ask you for your driver's license? They can't do it. They are not legally allowed to ask you for anything at a checkpoint. If you were pulled over by a police officer for some violation, that's one thing. If you were stopped at a checkpoint, you do not have to give them any information. As a matter of fact, you might want to ask them for their information. If any of you have listened to Kelly Spinner's show, you know I have a particular view of Obamacare. Obamacare is another of countless acts by the federal government to control, restrict, and tax us into oblivion, using regulations that we're told by the U.S. Supreme Court are constitutional. Sorry, I don't think so. I don't believe it. If you haven't read these two documents, Obamacare, the Patriot Act, you need to. Do not take the word of a supposed expert about what they say. We live in an age where we have the internet that we can download a PDF file and read what it is these people are doing to us. We've never had that opportunity in our history up until the past decade or so. Use it. We had a saying in the military that tracers work both ways. Same is true for the internet. They might be able to, figure out what you're doing, where you're going, but we can do the same to them. When in history have we ever been able to keep track of what the government is doing or going to do? It works both ways, people. Like I said, there is no way that we would have had the opportunities we have today. If you see something unconstitutional being done, you need to let people know. I'm not talking about what you necessarily read on the internet. Of course, we all know everything on the internet's true, right? But if you see something that's going on, you need to verify that is really what's going on, and you need to let people know. Information is a tool. It's a weapon for them and for us. This rally is about we the people, declaring to the government at the national, state, and local level that they better keep their hands off our most effective means of defense. Period. Whether it is defense from an individual or a government, efficient, effective weapons are our right, not a privilege. This statement is being made by someone that has been in combat. I'm not a keyboard commando trying to, incite a war from my armchair. These guys, they're stuck on their Modern Warfare 3 and think that's reality. It's just like the reality TV shows you see on TV. If that's reality, we're in deeper than I thought. I'm scared to death of the prospect of a war in our country. This is a country I love. I was willing to put my life on the line, but the thought of being in a war where my children are present scares me to death. But that being said, I'm even more scared of what this nation will become if we do not act in the best interest of our children's future freedoms. You might have taken notice recently how the feds have tried to ostracize and vilify veterans and say that if they have PTSD, that they shouldn't be able to own a gun, that they're a threat to our communities. To that I say, of course they're going to ostracize and vilify veterans. Veterans are the biggest threat the federal government has, because unlike people that fancy themselves able to fight a government while having never had any background in doing such, veterans are the ones that know how to do it. Veterans are the ones that have been in that position. Every walk of life, they have been there, and then they have been in combat. And there's nothing else, can be said. Of course they're going to vilify these guys. 2009, the MIAC report said that veterans coming back were more than likely going to be racist and have weapons. Well, that's kind of a no-brainer about having the weapons. As far as being racist, okay, I guess they've changed the definition of racist. I'm not really familiar with what term they're using. Military, veterans are some of the most non-racist people I've ever met in my life. I've put my life in the hands of men of every color, and they have done the same with me. I trusted my life to these guys. And for someone to tell me that I'm probably going to be a racist, well, all that is a distraction. Period. It's a distraction. When you see these things put out on the news, you need to look at what the little things are that they're barely reporting on, because more than likely, that distraction is something that is going to take your mind off of what they're doing, whether it's a distraction at some entertainment event or something that is a breaking story, which seems like everybody has breaking stories every 5 minutes on the news. The feds want you to believe that their purchase of ammunition in the billions of rounds, purchase of 2,700 armored vehicles designed to defeat mines used by the military, the use of drones, all this stuff is fine. They don't have to be accountable to us because they have our best interests at heart. Well, number one, I know they don't have our best interests at heart. Number two, they work for us. They are accountable to us. That's our money they're using to spend on that ammunition. That's our money they're using to buy these armored trucks. Period. They are accountable to us. They work for us. We need to make sure they start understanding that. The federal government, I know they believe they're invincible. They do. They're the federal government. Of course, they're here to help. I hate to tell them, but they might have the troops, they might have the equipment, but they don't have the heart and the guts that we as a people have. And they really don't have the troops that they think they have. They're assuming a lot, and that's going to be a deadly assumption. Tyrants, your time is up. We're not giving up one more inch. We're done. People in this nation have started to wake up, and it's a great thing to see. Just like today, it was awesome to see a lot of people here, people that I know are like mine. Unlike the First Lady, I've always been proud of my country. Always. My country is not necessarily my government, and it is definitely not my president this time around. My country is the American people and the American spirit. That is what my country is. I have one thing to say to my government. I took an oath to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Do not put me in a position to have no other choice but to defend the Constitution with arms. The Second Amendment is one of the most clear-cut amendments in the Bill of Rights. A well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. The right of the people to keep and bear arms. There is no ambiguity whatsoever. None. Keep means to retain in one's possession or power. Bear means to move while holding up and supporting, or to be equipped or furnished with. That's cut and dried to me. I don't need some overblown lawyer in a black robe to translate it for me. Recently, Senator Dianne Feinstein was apparently irritated by Senator Ted Cruz during a gun ban debate, and she had this to say: "I am not a sixth grader." The comment was made after Senator Cruz asked her if the constitutional authority she said Congress had and could use to ban certain guns could also be used to ban items in the Bill of Rights, specifically in the First and Fourth Amendment, and generally in the whole Bill of Rights. To Senator Feinstein, I say this: you're right, Senator. You're not a sixth grader. Act like it. Even a sixth grader knows what shall not be infringed means. Gun bans, whether they are at the federal, state, or local level, need to be resisted with every ounce of determination and force we have at our disposal. The Second Amendment is clear and concise. Let our message to the government be just as clear, just as concise. Let us show them the same resolve our founding fathers showed the King of England when they declared the independence of this nation. Without the ability to maintain arms for a common defense, which the Second Amendment espouses, the rest of the rights codified in the Bill of Rights can be brushed away by a tyrannical government with ease. I once told a hardcore liberal that I was a better man than him after he had railed for 30 minutes about how bad conservatives were. Of course, he was taken back by what he thought was a bold and arrogant statement and asked me how I thought this was so. I advised him at that point that the difference between us was simple. I was willing to fight and die, defending his right to disagree with me, and he was not willing to do the same thing. These people are not going to go along with what we want. They don't care what we believe. They are not willing to give us the same concessions that we have been willing to give them. You need to keep something else in mind. You hear people talk about revolution this, revolution that. There's even a TV show. I haven't watched it, but I heard it's about a revolution. We had a revolution in 1776. This is about a restoration. We have the tools we need. The Constitution and the Bill of Rights is all we need for that. If you want to go deeper than that, let's look at the 1791 Militia Act. Let's look at the 1903 Dick Act. All these things define what the militia really is. Go back to the Articles of Confederation. All these things talk about people's rights. If you do not know what your rights are, you need to. Especially if you're an adult. And teach your kids. Don't let these people put thoughts in their heads in school that you don't know what they're saying, and then one day wake up and your child is a liberal, and then wonder what happened. They want total control. They do. But we're not going to give it to them without a fight.
If they had it, they wouldn't know how to use it.
I'm not really big on this whole being out in the public thing. I mean, I've been on Kelly's show a few times. Radio is easy compared to this. Out here, I'm defenseless. We've all seen what has happened to people that have been the nail that sticks up. They get pounded down. If the government doesn't agree with them, they get pounded down. But with that being said, to do nothing, especially out of the fear of repercussions, is a mark of someone whose emotions are worth more to them than their convictions. My convictions are my guiding light in this life. Convictions, that's what you die for. That's what you die for. You live for your kids, you die for your convictions. I would much rather die and earlier in life, standing up for my convictions, no matter what they may be, than to live a long, uneventful life and die drooling into a cup while laying in bed. People, how you die and how you live are the defining part of anyone's existence. The reason I'm standing before you today isn't because I'm an expert on the Constitution or that I'm into politics. Honestly, politics really disgusts me, but I guess it's a necessary evil. Fortunately, we do have some politicians that understand about the oaths they've taken and stand up for that. I'm here because I realize I have to step up to champion the cause of liberty. It is a gift that we have to preserve for our children. There are those who will not speak out due to their fear of reprisal. To those people, I recite this quote from Samuel Adams. If you love wealth more than liberty, the tranquility of servitude better than the animating contest of freedom, depart from us in peace. We ask not your counsel nor your arms. Crouch down and lick the hand that feeds you. May your chains rest lightly upon you, and may posterity forget that you are our countrymen. I know of what I speak because I've made an effort to find out what's really going on. It really is more important than that unreality show. I've read the Patriot Act and I've read Obamacare. I keep up with the draconian edicts that come out of D.C. daily, Pratt, it seems like recently, because these people have to be killed to account. I also realize that I need to hold true to the oath I took as a soldier, and if I do not, I would be no better than the tyrants in D.C. that are violating their oaths, because they've all taken oaths. Anybody that is an elected official has taken an oath. Our sheriff has taken an oath. Our representatives have taken oaths. Chief of police don't take an oath. This guy in Wisconsin, that's Flynn, that has been giving the sheriff there all kinds of trouble, he never took an oath. He was appointed. He's a political hack that says that even though he finds out someone can walk down the street legally in Wisconsin wearing a firearm like I'm wearing today, he tells his officers that they need to throw him to the ground, take their gun away from him, and then they can decide whether or not they can have it. Well, to people like him, I say this: don't tell your guys to come and take it. You come and take it. You go ahead and come and take it. I have two quotes that I'm going to read to you, and after that I have some questions. These questions you really need to think about, especially after this one quote. First one is from the book Gulag Archipelago. It took place in Soviet Russia back during the purges with Stalin. Alexander Solzhenitsyn said this: "And how we burned in the camps later, thinking, what would things have been like if every security operative, when he went out in the night to make an arrest, had been uncertain whether he would return alive and had to say goodbye to his family, or if, during periods of mass arrest, as the example in Leningrad, where they arrested a quarter of the entire city, people had not simply sat in their lairs, pounding with terror at every bang of the downstairs door and every step in the staircase, but had understood they had nothing left to lose, and had boldly set up in the downstairs hall an ambush of a half a dozen people with axes, hammers, pokers, and whatever else was at hand. The organs would quickly have suffered a shortage of officers and transport, and notwithstanding all of Stalin's thirst, the cursed machine would have ground to a halt. If we did not love freedom enough, and even more, we had no awareness of the real situation. We purely and simply deserved everything that happened afterwards." Next quote is from none other than John F. Kennedy. "Today we need a nation of Minutemen who are not only prepared to take up arms, but citizens who regard the preservation of freedom as the basic purpose of their daily lives, and who are willing to consciously work and sacrifice for that freedom." Now I have some questions. 1, how much do you love freedom? 2, are you aware of the situation we face? 3, will you, like Solzhenitsyn, have to say, if only? 4, what do you think we deserve as free men? 5, are you a Minuteman prepared to take up arms? 6, as a patriot, what is your purpose? 7, what would you sacrifice for the freedom of your children? Let us not regret later what we should have done today for our children. Thank you.
Thanks, JC. The next individual I'm going to introduce is Ted Weaver Sr. Ted was a long-time resident of that state south of us, Maryland, that now lives in Spring Mills, West Virginia. He worked in property management and property development for over 20 years. Ted owned and operated an environmental testing company in Martinsburg, West Virginia, and worked as a community development coordinator for the town of Hancock, Maryland. He served as a board member of several nonprofit agencies over the years, including the Exchange Club Child Abuse Prevention Center of Hagerstown. And Ted retired in 2013 and created Responsibly Armed Citizens of America in July of 2012, where he currently serves as the CEO and chairman of the board. Also, as the founder of Responsibly Armed, he is an avid supporter of the Second Amendment and gun rights for all about law-abiding citizens. He supports and promotes firearm education, being responsibly armed, national carry for all law-abiding citizens legislation, which is currently being created by Responsibly Armed, which will be presented later this year for consideration in Washington. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ted Weaver.
Would you believe this is the first rally I could bring my own gun? There it is. Anyway, I'm just basically a dumb old country boy. I was raised in Maryland, and it is so good to come to Pennsylvania and see the crowd that we have here. It's good to see people that are wearing their sidearms, and from what I see so far, everyone that has a firearm is a responsibly armed person, which is what we like, because, you know, we don't want to go out and shoot anybody, and we don't want to go out and do crazy things, because whenever you do that's a real long day for everybody, you know? So, you know, part of being responsibly armed is knowing when and when not to do things, but the biggest thing that I like about where I'm at right now in life is at my age of 58, I've seen the days when people drove around with shotguns in the back windows of their pickup truck and no one paid any attention to it. I've seen the days in even Maryland that you could have a shotgun in the pickup window of your truck and you go to the mountains in Western Maryland, go deer hunting, it was all good. And more, the Second Amendment is being stomped on. Now, I'm going to also talk about politics a little bit, because being a lifelong resident of Maryland for at least the first 50 years of my life, I really feel bad for these people. And there's some of my Maryland friends here, and they know what they're going through. You know, you wake up one day, you can do something, the next day you wake up, you can't. And that's not right. The Second Amendment clearly says we have the right to bear arms. So that's what we should be doing. We're doing it here today. And I have a Pennsylvania concealed carry permit. I support your state. I have your license. I have one in West Virginia and a couple other states as well. Because you never know where you're not going to be able to get them anymore. So I figure I'm just going to collect them like I do credit cards. So, you know, you got to keep the spirit alive. But recently, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about what's going on in Maryland. I sent an email to one of the delegates that were fighting with this SB 281 bill for the state of Maryland, and he was, you know, pro-gun and everything, and I sent him a letter or by email on Saturday, and I said, I'd really like to talk with you. Give me a yell. Within 10 minutes, and this was at 11 o'clock at night on Saturday last week, he says, call me 24/7. His name is Michael Spiegel. He's a delegate from the Eastern Shore area. And I said, well, it's Easter. I'm not going to bother you. We'll talk Monday. I'll give you a call. Sunday night, Easter night, he sends me another email and he says, Ted, can we talk? I'm available. 11:30 at night, I spent 45 minutes talking to one of the delegates from the state of Maryland, because everything in Maryland with the Second Amendment rights just blew up in a handbasket. And they're looking at me, a dumb old country boy, and they're saying, you know, you have Responsibly Armed. We have a reach of about 660,000 people. We have 3,000 people that actually support our site. We just opened it up to membership, but people are starting to see that what we have put together is an alternative to the NRA, and the NRA is good. I belong to that for years, and I've given them money more than I should have. And it's all good, and it's all about the rights. You know, I look out here in the crowd and I see people that got bigger guns than me, and they're responsible. No one shot me yet, so it's a good day. And politically, here's what I want you guys to do, all of you. I spend about 8 hours a week on the telephone, and I call up every state in the United States. And I said, hi, I'm Ted Weaver. I'm the CEO for Responsibly Armed. And their first thing is, a what? But we're getting there. There's some states that don't ask me that anymore. But I call them up and I say, hey, you know, you guys are voting against the Second Amendment. What I want you to do is consider the Second Amendment as a God-given right. We have the right to bear arms, and as long as we're not idiots and we're not out shooting everybody, who are we hurting? We have that right. And I just want you to know that I support any pro-gun legislation. And what I'd like for you guys to do in Pennsylvania, because Pennsylvania and West Virginia is really a lot alike as far as the gun laws. You know, I can put on my 45 and I can walk into Walmart and get me a dozen donuts, and you know, if you walk in with a big enough gun, you got people in front of you that are saying, hey, after you, you go first. You know, they're the most respectful bunch of people you ever run into. You know, go to a 7-Eleven at 2 o'clock in the morning and get a cup of coffee wearing a gun. Guess what? Everybody's opening the door for you. You know, they're just nice people. But it's at the point where in West Virginia, and I don't know how it is up here in Pennsylvania, I'm not here that much, but I support your state and I support the politics and the fact that they recognize your Second Amendment rights. But what I would like for you to do tomorrow, Monday, whenever, call up the people that are in your government system that is pro-gun and say, hey, I'm John Doe. I exercise my Second Amendment rights, and I want you to know I appreciate that. Most of my phone calls are exactly the opposite. I'm telling everybody what horrible and ugly people they are to infringe on my rights, and why should I have to jump through all these hoops and spend all this money to get taxed, get registered, just so I can do what I should be able to do that I did when I was 8 years old and go hunting with a .30-30 Winchester and shoot deer at 12 years old, and no one paid any attention to you. And it's, you know, it's at the point that they make us look like we're the bad guys, and we're not the bad guys. You know, we're basically down to earth, everyday people who exercise our rights. But now I want to bounce back to Maryland a little bit. The interesting thing about Maryland is now that the SB 281 legislation has been approved. Martin O'Malley's happy. There's been thousands and thousands of people down in Annapolis protesting this. We unfortunately have gotten to a point in time in our country that the constituents are no longer important. If you get voted into office and you have your agenda, it doesn't matter what everybody out here wants. It doesn't matter what we think. It doesn't matter what we believe in. If their agenda is what they want, that's what they're going to give us. I just recently, well, in fact, it was last night at about midnight, I got copies of the SB 281 bill, and it's on my Facebook page of how every representative voted. And I put a note on there. I said, please print this and hold on to it. When the election comes up again, these are the people you want to make sure you don't vote for. And Responsibly Armed is going to be in the tri-state area, and we're going to make it known to everybody possible that this guy and this guy and this guy is the bad guy. We don't want to vote for them because, remember, they were against your rights. So we're going to do what we can to keep on going with the Second Amendment rights. And, you know, the concept behind Responsibly Armed was simply this. Last July, we had a mass shooting in a movie theater, and I was the last one to know about it. I was working at the office, and I came home, and my neighbors were waiting on me. And they said, see what those guns do? And I looked at my gun, and I said, well, it hasn't did anything. What do they do? And of course, they got upset with me. They called me a couple choice words, and they went and slammed the door and went in. So a couple days later, I went to that same neighbor, and I said, let me ask you a question. I said, if somehow, some way, some night, God forbid, I hear you screaming to the top of your lungs, you being anti-gun and against guns and against the Second Amendment and everything else, I said, what would you really rather me do? Dial 911 for you? Or would you like me to get one of my so-called guns and come over and help you out? And she said, oh my, she says, Ted, you would, she says, I trust you. I would want you to come over and help me. And I said, I'm no different than anybody else, even the strangers here that are carrying guns. I trust them. I trust anybody that has a gun. It's our right. It's like our right to walk around in freedom. It's that simple, folks, and we're losing it. Maryland has already lost it. I don't know if we're going to be able to change that. They're talking about going to referendum. We're talking with attorneys. I don't know how many people here are familiar with Roscoe Bartlett, the congressman from Maryland of 20 years. He's on my board of directors. He is working with me. Blaine Young is another good friend of mine. He's running for governor of Maryland. If Blaine Young is elected to become the next governor of Maryland, Responsibly Armed will be at the table helping to instrument responsible gun laws and writing them and the training programs and so forth. But we are just so lucky here in Pennsylvania because you recognize these rights. And please call up your legislators and your political people and thank them. You know, the technology is so great today, you don't even have to do it really. You can call up on the weekend and get an answering machine. That's when I like to do it. Or you can send an email. That's even easier yet. And all the NRA sites have all these click here and it shoots an email to them instantly. So it's not hard. But the thing that happened in Maryland was everybody was jumping up and down saying, I appreciate the guns. I want to, I stand up for the Second Amendment. I want my rights. Now that they passed SB 281, they are crawling out of the woodwork because no one made the phone call, no one sent the email. So folks, if we continue to do nothing, we're going to get nothing. If anything, they're going to take things away from us. So, look at where you are in life, look at what you want to do in life, but for God's sakes, people, don't let them take our Second Amendment. Don't let them take anything, because I want to share one other story. I have a friend of mine who supports Responsibly Armed. He's around here taking pictures. I hope he's getting some good ones of me this time. But anyway, he took a picture at the last rally that we had in Hagerstown, the 223 rally that I spoke at. And he came up with this picture, and it was a woman that she was probably in her maybe mid to later 20s. She had a small child in a backpack that was on her back. She had 3 other little girls, and the background was so unique because it just would remind you of someone in the ghettos that was poor and so forth. But she didn't have a gun. She didn't own a gun. And she had this really, and I thought it was an ugly sign. I mean, it was handmade, but it was ugly. And it said, "Protect our freedoms." And then at the bottom of it, and she had drawn a picture of a gun. It must have been a Glock because it was an ugly gun, but anyway. Just kidding. Don't take it personal. But anyway, what happened was, at the bottom of it, she says, "Lock up the criminals." Folks, that's all the harder it is. Take care of the laws that we got. Enforce the laws that we have. If I go out there acting like an idiot, waving my 45 cig around, if someone don't call the cops and get me locked up, you missed your opportunity. But there's no one doing that. Guns are a serious responsibility. And I tell people on my website and on my Facebook, guns are not for everybody. I've had people go to the range with me, and I'm all the time inviting people to the range. And even if you never shot before, I'll let you come up and I'll let you shoot my bullets and I'll let you play with my guns, because I want you to understand, whether you're for or against guns, to know what a gun is and what it can do and what its limits are. If you don't understand a gun, you don't like them. And I got a reply for that. If you don't like them, don't buy them. It's just that easy, And I'm sure you've all heard that before. But you have to understand things before you condemn them. We are living in a nation now that if people don't understand it, it's easier to condemn it. And if you're the people that are for these things, it's easier to wait until the guy next door calls up and says thank you, or I'm against it, and so on and so forth. So we all have to take our own responsibilities. We need to act. Even if you got what you want, call them up. And the other thing is, I have people from all over the United States that are on my organization and support us. I got people from Spain, Canada, Argentina. I have people from Russia, believe it or not. I got 4 people supporting me from Russia. I have no idea what they're saying, but they're there. And I have from Thailand. I have from the United Kingdom a very avid group of supporters. And they're looking at the United States and they're saying, you guys are just so lucky. But every day we're in for the battle of our life. Even if it's going our way, don't take for granted it's going to be there next year. You know, you got to keep this fight going, and you've got to keep fighting for the rights. And a real neat thing is, I have been told off several times on my own Facebook page, and that's usually fun. And yet I leave those remarks on because, number one, who am I to want the Second Amendment rights if I take and put a little X on those people that don't agree with me and wipe them off the website? So if you go onto my Facebook page, and if you go back far enough, you're going to see where I got some really good tongue lashings from people. But I tell you, the thing that happened the first time I was assaulted online, there was 75 people that came to my rescue, and I never had to say a word. And these people took up for the Second Amendment and my rights quicker than I could. But one thing I'm going to do before I leave is, I explained to you earlier about the picture of the young lady with the 4 girls. I had another vision of that same scene. Now try to create in your mind a young lady, 3 young girls, one in her back. She's holding a sign saying, "Keep my freedoms and lock up the criminals." I'm going to leave you with this parting vision. Imagine that same very picture that I just described on the day that the Second Amendment rights no longer exist. At that point in time, my friends, that sign will be held by the same woman, only it's going to read something different. And it's going to say, I get choked up over this. It's going to say, "Dear God, we are no longer free." Think about it. If you lose the Second Amendment rights, you've lost your freedom. Thank you so much. I'm going to have one of my board members, his name is Jim Woods. He's a little more technical than I am and uses some better words than I do, but I want him to speak for just a few brief minutes. But sincerely, check us out on the website, www.responsiblyarmed.org. We also are on Facebook, Responsibly Armed. Thank you. You've been very gracious and nice. Thank you to the Patriot 912 organization for inviting us. Thank you.
Well, Americans, patriots, good to see you all out here. First of all, let me say that I've noticed all of the guns, and unlike the people in Washington, D.C., I feel extremely safe. I don't know why they're so cowardly. JC, thank you for your service to the country. I served as well. God bless you. My remarks are going to be very limited, ladies and gentlemen. On the building above me, you will notice virtue, liberty, independence. Without virtue, you cannot have liberty. Without liberty, there is no independence. Sir Edmund Burke once made the statement, and I won't get it exactly, but I will paraphrase it. He said, all that is needed for evil to prosper is for good men to stand by and do nothing. At 61 years of age with 4 grandchildren, I should be able to stay in my home and live a comfortable life, loving my children and my family. But instead, I'm willing to die. Yes, JC, I am willing to die to preserve this country, not just for myself, for my children and for my grandchildren, but for yours. And for every child that will come for generations to come. That's the kind of dedication it's going to take. This is our country. It belongs to us. It does not belong to them. If they want it, come and take it.
Well, I see we've moved into the sunlight now, so I do have some sunscreen here, 70 SPF, if anybody wants it. It's my pleasure and my honor to announce our next speaker, and this is State Representative Darryl Metcalfe. And let me give you a little background on this gentleman. He's serving his 8th term in office, serving the residents of Butler County. Representative Metcalfe serves as the Republican majority chairman of the Pennsylvania House State Government Committee, which is responsible for reviewing legislation dealing with all aspects of state government. During his tenure, Representative Metcalfe has been a leader on the tough issues like ending teacher strikes, making PA a right-to-work state, and eliminating property taxes in the Commonwealth. Representative Metcalfe was also the author of the Pennsylvania Voter Identification Protection Act, which requires voters to show valid photo identification each and every time they vote. As a statewide leader on ending the illegal alien invasion, Representative Metcalfe is also the founder of the State Legislators for Legal Immigration. The coalition, which was founded in 2007, serves as a network for state legislators across the nation who are committed to working together in demanding full cooperation among our federal, state, and local governments in eliminating all economic attractions and incentives for illegal aliens, as well as securing our borders against unlawful invasion. Representative Metcalfe has always been a stalwart defender of the Second Amendment. On April 23rd at 10 a.m., he will be holding his 2nd annual Second Amendment Action Day at the state capitol in Harrisburg. Most recently, Representative Metcalfe announced his legislation, House Bill 357, the Right to Bear Arms Protection Act. That legislation that would make any new federal gun control laws unenforceable within the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So please welcome Representative Metcalfe.
Thank you for the great introduction. I appreciate it. Good to be with you all. Nice to be invited. Beautiful day God's blessed us with to be here and rallying together for our God-given rights. So I know I'm in the district of State Representative Rob Kaufman, and Rob had, I think, originally planned on possibly being here, but something came up. He'd sent me an email that he wasn't going to be able to make it, so he wanted me to make sure that I mentioned to you on his behalf, of course. He's one of my greatest allies at the Capitol in our fight to protect the Second Amendment and protect our other liberties. So Rob does a good job for this region at the Capitol, and I know he's missed here today, but glad that I was able to be with you from Butler County. So I actually grew up in upstate New York, up around northwest of Syracuse. I grew up in a rural setting. I grew up around firearms. My father was actually deer hunting when I was born, so mother didn't appreciate it that much, but I can appreciate it as a deer hunter. But grew up around firearms, and you know, not everybody in this nation has the opportunity to grow up around firearms, to understand what kind of a tool they are. You know, there's a lot of folks that think that they get their steaks from the grocery store, and that's where it comes from. That isn't, of course. And a lot of folks don't understand that firearms are really the tool of freedom, aren't they? Firearms are the tool of freedom. Can you agree with that? After graduating from high school, I went straight into the United States Army, right out of high school at the age of 17, and I raised my hand. I swore to uphold and defend the Constitution of our great nation, just as JC did and the gentleman that was just speaking before me. And how many other veterans do we have out here? Thank you for your service. Everyone who has served our nation in the military, everyone who goes into office takes that oath to uphold and defend the Constitution. Well, in Pennsylvania, our Pennsylvania Constitution, which I swore to uphold and defend when I became a state legislator, On swearing-in day, every 2 years, once I'm reelected, we swear to uphold and defend the Constitution every session, both the Constitution of our country and the Constitution of our state. Now in Pennsylvania, Article 1, Section 21 is even more strongly worded than the Second Amendment. It leaves no doubt about our Second Amendment rights, about our right to bear arms, about Article 1, Section 21 and the meaning of it. To paraphrase, that the right of the citizens to bear arms in defense of themselves and the state shall not be questioned. Shall not be questioned. Well, unfortunately, we have people within the UN that are questioning our rights. We have people in D.C. that are questioning our rights. We have people in Philadelphia and in Pennsylvania that are questioning our rights. One of those individuals has been in the state legislature probably 8 or 9 terms longer than myself, from Philadelphia. In 1999, my first term, we were debating a piece of legislation that was attacking the Second Amendment, and during debate, I asked that individual if he had actually read the Second Amendment to the U.S. Constitution or read Article 1, Section 21 of the Pennsylvania Constitution, and his answer was no. I have it on a DVD. I've been sharing it with kids at school to show them who they shouldn't vote for in the future. People like that. I was so shocked by his answer that I asked him the question, I said, what was that? And he said, well, could you repeat your question? And I repeated my question, and the answer was no again. Just a shocking revelation. But it really shouldn't be, because I think he's not the exception for those in elected office. I think he's the rule. I think the majority of people in elected office don't read that document that they're supposed to uphold and defend. How in the world are you going to defend something and you don't know what's in it? Biden's another good one. When he told his wife, I said, Jill, if there's ever a problem, just walk out on the balcony, take that double-barrel shotgun, and fire 2 blasts outside the house. What an idiot. I mean, who's she going to hit when she goes and shoots off the balcony? Certainly not the guy coming through the front door with a machete, right? That's why I've had my wife and daughter at the range, so they know how to use a .357 and make sure that they acquire their target and deal with it, and use force to make sure that they're not threatened any longer. We passed Castle Doctrine last session. Governor Corbett signed it into law. We have been working on it for many years. This is our 8th annual rally. I really attribute our success in getting that passed to the activism that has been shown through our rallies at the Capitol. Every year we have a rally to protect the Second Amendment. People come in from across the state, walk the halls afterwards, lobby legislators, let them know that they're demanding that our rights are protected. But there's some people that, even though you do that, they don't listen. People like Angel Cruz out of Philadelphia, Democrat, proposing that we have to register all of our firearms in Pennsylvania. People like Ron Waters, Democrat, out of Philadelphia, proposing that if you have a carry permit, he wants you to have $1 million worth of liability insurance. People like Senator Farnese out of Philadelphia, that if you don't have your permit on you, if you would have left it in another purse or another wallet, then he wants you to do a year in jail. You also have some Democrats that are proposing that we roll back Castle Doctrine. We just passed it. It's been used across the state in defense of law-abiding citizens' rights to ensure they can protect themselves. So we have those threats coming at us out of Philadelphia, just mirroring what's coming out of D.C. Representative Sanacero out of Bucks County, Democrat, proposing a universal comprehensive type background check that his mayor, the New York City mayor, Bloomberg's proposing, of course, with all his crazy ads going across Pennsylvania. But as we look at those, as we look at all of what they're proposing, you have to recognize that the facts don't back up their arguments. They're supposedly trying to protect people, right? That's their argument, that they want to protect us. Well, we don't need their protection for number one, especially here. I think we're in one of the safest places here in Franklin County right now. When you start looking at the bills that they're proposing and you look at the facts of what's really going on, you recognize that they have it all wrong, and all they're doing is trying to disarm the citizens of the state and nation. Because the real right to bear arms wasn't so you could go duck hunting. It was not so that you could just protect yourselves and your family and your property against a criminal element, but it was so that you could protect yourself against those tyrants who might want to violate and take away your rights. So you could ensure that we, the people, remain the government of this great nation. That's why we have the Second Amendment. That's why we have Article 1, Section 21. We looked at some statistics out of Philadelphia to just look at one of the areas in the state where really you're seeing most of these ideas come from that are the liberal gun-grabbing type ideas that we're battling in Harrisburg. And when you look in Philadelphia, in 2011 there were 324 murders. 81.8% of those were with firearms. The firearms that they used were not the .223 round or the AR-15 that shoots the .223. They weren't the many other firearms that they're proposing to do away with. They were 9mm, they were .45 caliber and .40 calibers for the most part that were being used in those crimes. So if they really want to stop the shootings, if they really want to stop the homicides, why are they going after weapons that aren't used? You know, when the National Institute of Justice, an agency of the Department of Justice, came out with a report in January, pretty exhaustive report on many of the various ideas that they're putting out there to take away our rights. And it was recognized in that report that other studies had shown that the supposed weapons that should be banned, the assault weapons that they're calling them, the ones that were banned from 94 to 2004, that those types of weapons prior to 1994 in the study, they were used in 2 to 8% of the crimes. 2 to 8%. So 92 to 98% of the crimes being committed were with other firearms, but they're telling us they want to protect us. I mean, it really pulls the veil off of what they're trying to do, and that's incrementally steal our rights, violate our rights, and trying to use weapons that they think can be used to demonize our right altogether. They're using that in the press. When you look at the murders that were committed in Philadelphia, that's that 81.8% that were committed with firearms. The murderers in Philadelphia during that 2011 timeframe of the 324 people, the murderers, 84% of them had been arrested previously. 70% of them had been arrested for violent crime previously. 17% had been arrested 11 or more times previously. 81% of their victims had been arrested previously. The problem is the other 19% weren't armed, right? You've got criminal on criminal crime. The 19% that weren't criminals, they weren't armed, and that's the real problem. We need to make sure we have more law-abiding citizens that are armed, because that's the best deterrent to crime and the best deterrent to tyrants. When you look at the National Institute of Justice's report on the universal, or as Bloomberg is calling them, the mayor of New York is calling them in his ads in Pennsylvania, the comprehensive background check that he'd like to require us all to have, I think, you know, a lot of the public don't understand that when you go to buy a firearm right now, retail, be it long gun or handgun, you go through the NICS, at least, the National Instant Check System, and most likely you go through a state redundant backup system, which is the Pennsylvania Instant Check System for us in Pennsylvania, which we need to do away with because it's just another obstruction to our rights. And the problems that it's created for actual transactions has been unacceptable. But most of the public don't understand that we're already going through background checks for every retail purchase. It's not the private transfers, the private sales that are being used to put firearms in the hands of criminals. The National Institute of Justice report recognized the majority of criminals get their firearms through one, stealing them, or two, straw purchasers. Straw purchasers are somebody that doesn't have any liability already on their record that would prevent them from buying a firearm legally. But according to federal law, when somebody buys a firearm, sells it to somebody knowingly, or that they should have known to be somebody who isn't allowed to have a firearm, they're committing a felony already. So why another law to make you and I have to go through additional checks when we want to sell our shotgun to our brother or our mother or our daughter? It's not right. It's just another obstruction. It's just an incremental erosion of our freedom. And when you look at the reasons that they're advocating that we have these advanced or these exhaustive background checks, they're throwing out the mental health issue to us. Well, I think just as so many on the left do not want to recognize that our rights are God-given, not government-given, they also don't want to recognize that there is evil within mankind. They don't want to call evil evil anymore. They don't want to call sin sin. They want to call it a mental health problem or an addiction. When somebody commits a crime and murders somebody, that's wicked, and they should be punished for their crime. And to try and change it into it's just all mental health issues, and we give that ground up, we're letting them take us into an area that we shouldn't be going with our rights. Because as was said by JC, when you start trying to identify veterans with this or that disorder, that now they're going to be a risk, and if you live with them, then you're going to be a risk, that's a problem. It's a slippery slope that's going to erode all of our rights. assault weapons ban that they had proposed in 94 to 2004. There were studies done on that, and when it sunset, and prior to it sunsetting in 2004, it was very obvious from the CDC, there's another institute that also did a study on it that had said that there was no impact they could really show from those weapons being banned. So why ban them, other than incrementally taking away our rights, right? And I think here in Pennsylvania, some of the strongest evidence we have on our side to show that a law-abiding citizenry who is armed is the best deterrent to crime are our very own state police reports that we get annually. They issue a couple of reports, the Firearms Annual Report and the Uniform Crime Report. And when we correlated the results of those reports from 2006 to 2011, there were almost 3 million firearms sold in Pennsylvania in that time frame. Almost 3 million firearms sold in that time frame. As it's at the same time as you have 3 million more guns on the streets and in the homes of Pennsylvanians from 2006 to 2011, we saw a 20% decrease in violent crime with a firearm. A 20% decrease. So right here in Pennsylvania, it proves just from our police reports just what many of us have been arguing, that the law-abiding citizens are not the problem. They are the answer to fixing the problem. You only defend your liberty one of two ways, either through military force or political force. And today we're not here to talk about the use of military force, we're here to talk about the use of political force, right? Because we don't want to see a day when we or our children or our grandchildren are put in that position, as JC has said, we don't want to see where they're put in a position of having to defend their liberties with force, military force on their own soil. I'd rather watch us defend our freedom on foreign soil and stop the threat there rather than having to do it on our own soil. Unfortunately, when we raise our hand and swear to uphold and defend our Constitution, the bigger problem we have now, unfortunately, is we swear to protect it against all threats, both foreign and domestic. All enemies, both foreign and domestic. And most of our enemies against the Constitution are domestic currently. So we have to stop them politically. We have to use political force. And I know some people don't like politicians, as JC had mentioned. I hate politicians. I don't aspire to be a politician. I aspire to be a statesman. Somebody who's looking out for the next generation, not the next election cycle. And it's great that everybody's here today, but we need to spread the word. I've been talking at events like this across the state. I was up in Lehigh Valley, up in the Easton area, talking at the Lehigh Valley Tea Party last night to a couple hundred people. Over the last few weeks, I've been in Lewisburg, I've been in Bloomsburg, I've been in Mercer County, I've been in Venango. I was down actually in Bruce Castor's county, down in Montgomery County. Bruce is the county commissioner down there, former DA from Montgomery County. I was down there in Norristown, speaking at a rally on 223. And I think we were in I think Norristown's one of the high crime areas for Montgomery County there.
After I left the DA's office.
It's after you left the DA's office. But we were in Norristown with a group like this that were armed, and once again, we were in the safest place in the county at that point. We need to, as I've been talking at these events, and we've seen a lot of activity from citizens like yourselves across the state and more around the country, we need more of this, not less. Your attendance at this day's rally here, at today's rally, can't be the end of your activism. It has to be the beginning, if it's the beginning. And if it's part of that, it has to be a continuation, if you've already been doing this before. But you need to educate your fellow citizens, whether they're in your workplace, in your home, or at your church. Because we need citizens to understand that if we don't protect the Second Amendment, if we don't protect Article 1, Section 21, we will lose the rest of our liberty. And tyrants will be in control of this country. On April 23rd, there's an opportunity to do that at the state capitol. And it's great to have rallies on Saturday, and it's great to have rallies in your own community, but in order to have attention paid by elected officials to your rallies, you have to show up where they work. You have to show up at their capitol office. You have to show up at their district office. You have to show up at the town hall meetings they're having. You've got to make it painful for them to be doing anything else than supporting your rights. And you've got to be in their face to make sure they're doing it. Because if you owned a business You wouldn't tell your employees, your manager of your business, you know what, I'll be back, I'll check on you in 2 years, I'll check on you in 4 years, would you? You can't just check on your elected officials at election time. You have to hold all of us accountable throughout our term of office. You need to be showing up at the Capitol and our offices. If you can't do it on the 23rd of April, do it some other day during the year. Take your kids, take your parents, visit the Capitol offices, lobby your legislators, because if you're not lobbying, you can guarantee Ceasefire PA, who wants to steal your rights, they're paying people to lobby. They'll be lobbying and bussing people in. So we need to be vigilant to protect liberty, because that's the only way we'll ultimately make sure that we hold on to it by political force. And the thought that I would leave you with is this. All of us that raised our hands, that we have sworn to uphold and defend the Constitution as veterans, all of us that are serving or have served in office, anyone who's served in any capacity where you've sworn to uphold and defend the Constitution, embrace that as a lifetime oath, not just for the term that you were in or the time that you were in. That should be a lifetime oath. And for those of you who haven't taken that oath, you don't have to officially raise your hand. As a patriotic American, I encourage you, embrace the oath to defend your Constitution.
I love short bios. It's my job to give you the bio, right? Thank you all for coming out. What a beautiful day, right? My name is Dan Bongino. I was the 2012 Republican nominee for the U.S. Senate in the formerly great state of Maryland. I love my home, folks, but we're losing it. You know, it's been brought up quite a bit. Do you feel any safer if you are a Maryland resident or if you live on the border today, now that our governor, the benevolent Martin O'Malley, passed this, and I use the air quotes, gun control law? Does anybody here feel safer? No! I mean, it's an honest question. There's no hyperbole there. I'm not trying to be smart about it. Why? He's controlling guns, right? Of course, it's the firearm to blame. It's the tool. It's not the plague of violence that's plagued the human heart. It has to be the tool. This gentleman has one. Clearly, he's a danger to all of us here. Everybody's walking away from him right now. Folks, this is all funny because it's funny. It's ridiculous what's happening in this country. Think about this. If this was really about, and I always use the air quotes here, gun control and gun violence control, then why does nobody here feel any safer? You're all sound, patriotic, normal IQ Americans who work for a living, who can figure out on your own when you're safe and when you're not. Nobody here feels safer for one reason. This was never about guns. Ever. This was about attacking an idea. The idea of liberty and freedom, folks. This was about people control from the start. Now, I see some American flags around here. Ladies and gentlemen, that's not a tablecloth. It's not a curtain. It's not the piece of fabric that matters. You're not pledging allegiance to a piece of fabric. You are pledging allegiance to a series of ideas unique to this place, right here where you stand. Ideas that were so important that millions of men and women have died for them. They have died horrible deaths to preserve that idea that's under attack. It is not about guns. It was never about guns. That idea is unique to us. That's why we are so special. We are different. American exceptionalism is exceptional. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the fight of your lifetime right now. You know, I am sorry, and I mean this. I am sorry that this fight at this time has been hoisted onto your backs. There was nothing I could do. I lost my race. We were in a tough state, folks. I assure you I would be there fighting with my last breath to preserve what I feel are your liberties evanescing away by the minute. My sincere apologies that we all know the path forward to prosperity, but the government obstructionists in front of us just won't let us do it. The ideas are so simple. What is under attack are your economic liberty. Folks, it's real. That is real. Every percentage of your tax dollars extra that you give to a government bureaucrat is one you did not spend. That is a percentage more of your time where you work for someone else. That is real. You can touch that. That is your hands that did that. Every time you have to call a government bureaucrat, thanks to Obamacare, to get permission to not take the pill, as the president said, and actually get a procedure done, that is your liberty gone. That is real. That's not a word. That's not a campaign slogan. I'm not running in Pennsylvania. I live in Maryland. Folks, that is real. Your freedom is real. We have never known any different. Ever. That's why some, not those folks here, don't respect it. They don't know what it's like when it is gone. And when it is gone, it only takes blood to get it back. Your freedom and your liberty is a zero-sum game. It cannot belong to you and a government bureaucrat at the same time. I bring that up because we've already seen the attack and the assault on your economic liberty. We've already seen the attack on your healthcare liberty. But now this is the most dangerous attack of all. It's an attack on your very right to self-protection. Folks, if these tools were so dangerous, you'd be in the most dangerous corner in Pennsylvania right now. It is not. I was a Secret Service agent for 12 years. I was with the NYPD for 4. I had the ability to carry a gun while I was a Secret Service agent anywhere in the country, on a plane, Puerto Rico, overseas when they let us. You know what? It never went off by itself. I never had to skin it. You know, you skinned that smoke wagon, as they said, you better be ready to talk business. I never had to. And I thank the Lord for that every day. That's not a situation I ever want to be in. But folks, in your house, in your home, with your family, with my 2 daughters, God forbid I ever ran into a situation where you had to fire that weapon and potentially take the life of someone else. That's a decision no man or woman wants to make. But even worse, it's no decision you want to leave in the hands of a government bureaucrat. That is your home. Those are my 2 daughters. I'm not asking you for your permission to defend them. That was given to me by my God. Whoever your God may be, you were birthed into this world with the ability to defend your life and your family. I don't want your permission. I'm not asking for it. So folks, where does that leave us? We're in a dangerous time. Buried. There are people out there who really believe that it's all going to go away. It'll be better tomorrow. Your healthcare problems are fixed. The economy will turn around. He's not really going after guns. Don't worry about it. Gun violence will disappear. There are people who really believe that. It's not true. We're losing. I'm sorry to tell you that, but we are losing. How do we fight back? Folks, there's only power in right now. The representative mentioned political power. He's right. There is only power in the now. There's pain, there's joy, and memories in the past. There's always fear and excitement about the potential in the future. But there's only power in this moment, right now. If you leave here today and no action comes of it, this was all for naught. Are you registered? If you're here and you're not registered to vote, I've got news for you. You're not part of the problem. You're the problem. You are. You may not want to hear that, folks, but your no vote was a vote. And it was a vote to let it happen while you stood by. Are your neighbors registered to vote? Your like-minded neighbors? Are there any gun shows in Pennsylvania that your local political clubs or gun clubs can get out to and register folks? You know, I lost on November 6th. On November 7th, I was out working again. I'm not asking for anyone's pat on the back. I'm doing it because we're losing our country. Action matters, folks. The only power is in right now, in this second. All of those tomorrows are only built on increments of today. If you don't go forth today and do something, you are contributing to this absolute disaster where your liberty is leaving you now. please, I ask you, I hope you enjoy the speech and the speakers. They were wonderful. But leave today. Email us, find us. I'll tell you, I'll find a way in Pennsylvania to get you involved, I promise. But join your club, speak out, register, show up in that next election, show up at the State House, and change the world, folks. We can take it back. Tomorrow can be better. Yesterday doesn't always have to be terrible. Thank you so much for your time. It's an honor to be here. Thanks a lot.
What a beautiful day God has given us. My fellow patriots, I thank you for coming out and supporting your Second Amendment rights. The man I'm introducing today, his name is Larry Pratt. Mr. Pratt has served as Executive Director of Gun Owners of America for over 30 years now. Their membership has well over 300,000 members at this point, and they represent all of our American rights. They are dedicated to preserving our Second Amendment rights to bear and keep arms. Gun Owners of America lobbies for the Second Amendment down in Washington, D.C. and also at our state levels. They also provide legal assistance to those that are involved with lawsuits for the alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. Mr. Pratt has appeared on numerous radio and television programs and has had columns that appeared in newspapers across the country. Fellow patriots, Larry Pratt.
Good afternoon, patriots. I think we're making the ruling class mad. They don't like the idea that there's another voice in the country and that the voice is becoming more and more focused. We're producing results, we're winning elections, we're pushing back, we're educating our children as we wish. It's just not going according to their plan. You know, I like to make the point that the gun control issue is simply part of the whole battle against almost any ruling class. There's a group of people, I'm sure almost every country, and they typically aren't hereditary. They just assume that they were born to rule, and that you and I, conversely, were born to be ruled. And so it would have been better if they'd have come during the introduction. It would have been much more dramatic. But I have an illustration of how they seem to think, and it came to me by way of a CNN international debate that I had with a British parliamentarian right on the eve of their adopting their now almost total gun ban. I think this was back in the end of 2006 or 7. And this was a conservative, as they are called in Britain. That isn't very conservative compared to here, but that's the best they can do. And he was so proud of the gun control measure that they were on the verge of imposing. And I said, well, let me tell you what is likely to happen. I'm not a prophet, but there's all this research that's been done in our country. Let me just tell you a little bit about Dr. John Lott, who found, after looking at all the counties and all of the country and their record in dealing with violent crime over 20 years, that if you made gun control stricter, you found the crime rate went up. And if you made gun control more relaxed, you found that violent crime went down. So I said, I can tell you with almost total certainty that what you're about to do is going to see an increase in violent crime. And he remonstrated, I say, anybody that would say anything like that over here, we'd say he's quite flaky. I said, I know you would. That's why we're no longer British. Now, we laugh at his accent, but in fact, I was right. It did happen, and it is a nastier place. It's true they have a lower murder rate than we do, whether by firearms or anything else. But they are the 4th most violent country in the world for crime overall, only exceeded by Honduras, Jamaica, and El Salvador. Quite a competition. So that staid, oh so proper British accent Well, Piers Morgan can stick it. Oh, I see you've met the man. He sends his regrets. He wasn't able to make it today. He would have been so happy here. One of the things that struck me during the Benghazi crisis was we had withdrawn defense forces from where the U.S. personnel were. I've never figured out, they say they weren't diplomats, they say they weren't consular people, so where those U.S. citizens were, whatever they were, they pulled away a few hundred armed men. Not too surprisingly, within about 3 weeks, the Muslims struck, because that's what Muslims do. And to think that they can be in a dangerous city where they knew there was all kinds of extremism percolating and be there without any real defense, that's the mentality that says you and I shouldn't have a gun here inside the country either. They really believe that being able to defend yourself, that even the modest display of weapons that we have openly here today is somehow provocative. And it's only going to lead to violence and make situations worse. And, you know, if they want to believe that way, I don't have too much trouble with that. But I do have a problem when they try to impose that on me. We have a fight for our lives right now, and hopefully you've been contacting your senators. This could go either way next week on the Harry Reid gun control legislation. And don't think that somehow if it manages to get out of the Senate, which I think we're going to contain in the Senate, but if it were to get out of the Senate and into the House, don't think that John Boehner is going to be the man on the white horse. John Boehner actually is cause for zoologists to have recognized a new phylum. He can walk upright without a vertebra. I see you know him too. The government's arrogant as all get out. You've heard, I'm sure, this crowd certainly, that Big Sis at the Department of Homeland Security has purchased 100 million rounds of hollow point ammunition this year alone. And they already have 236 million rounds in inventory. All hollow point, apparently. I guess they're not doing much target practice because that's pretty expensive stuff to use for target practice. When Representative Hulskamp of Kansas asked, "What you doing with all that?" No answer. The government is so out of control they won't even respond to somebody who was exercising a constitutional responsibility to have oversight of the bureaucracy of the federal government. And their answer is no answer. We have a situation where Washington may or may not bring itself under control. One of the better measures that's there right now is from Representative Steve Stockman of Texas. And his proposal is that the ban on guns at schools be done away with. If that were the case, then the next time some dirtbag goes into a school like Sandy Hook, there would be a much greater likelihood that a teacher or a principal or a janitor would be there to respond as a first responder with a gun rather than a first responder with feet. But the real hope for the future in the short run that I can see is at the state and local level. You heard from Representative Metcalfe about the nullification measure that he has introduced here in your legislature. And he's not alone among legislators around the country. But also at the county level, there are sheriffs in many different states of the country that are also pushing back. They've read their Constitution and they know what powers the federal government has. There's about 18 of them in Article 1, Section 8, maybe a couple of others elsewhere in the Constitution, and that's it. And they're very specific and very, very limited. And so he is told, just to give one example, representatives of the Food and Drug Administration that had been hassling a farmer because he was producing raw milk, and somehow the FDA is just obsessed with stamping out raw milk. People are dying from it all the time. It's a real epidemic. And sarcasm, in case anybody was not listening. And so he was contacted by the farmer who said, the FDA is going to confiscate my equipment. They're going to put me out of business. I'll be a ruined man. So he went out to the farm just to make sure he wasn't dealing with a little house of horrors. And no, there weren't dead animals all over the place. And it was really a very nice operation. So he emailed the head attorney for the EPA in Washington and he said, I've been out to the farmer's place and I can tell you from looking at the Constitution, you have neither grounds from the farmer's operation or from the Constitution to put a foot on his property. And if you do so, I will arrest you. And she responded, well, if you try that, we'll arrest you. And Sheriff Rogers responded, and this was, I think, the last word, game on. And that was 15, 16 months ago. But it's not a magic wand, because not far away from there in a county in Wisconsin, the same threat came from the state authorities, and the sheriff in that county didn't get it, and so the state authorities were able to put a raw milk producer out of business. He didn't have protection of his sheriff. So I would submit that it's well that we pay attention to who we're sending to Washington and to the state capitol, but it also is extremely important that we have a constitutionally minded sheriff that will stand up and interpose himself between Washington and we the people. If we can get sheriffs like that, we can control the Leviathan in Washington, because the Leviathan will be substantially limited to the limits of the District of Columbia where they belong. And it seems to me that this was just an occasional event when a sheriff had this understanding in years past, but now we probably have pushing 400 sheriffs that are on record that there's not going to be any gun confiscation in their county that's any kind of unconstitutional federal action. And many of those 400 have actually said they would arrest federal officials if they tried it. This is a movement. And I hope you will encourage this movement here in Pennsylvania and in the sheriff races that take place in this state. We can stop the excess of the unconstitutional, the illegitimate exercise of power by the federal government, and we can do it one county at a time, one sheriff at a time. And you may not be in a position to sign up and be a paid deputy, but you can sure volunteer. Joe Arpaio has some 2,500 volunteers in Phoenix, Arizona, in Maricopa County. So it can be done county by county, and I would lay that out as the standard that we should plant, that it's the county sheriff that we should be looking for, recruiting if he's not where he needs to be. By the way, there will be a conference, and I'll be glad to give you information about it later, at the end of May in St. Charles, Missouri. Sheriffs will be explaining to other sheriffs who are coming to this conference, this is how I kicked the feds out of my county. This is how I told them I would have put them in my jail if they exercised that illegitimate authority. And I have seen it already encourage sheriffs who were kind of on the fence. They were interested in the idea, but they really didn't know quite what to make of it. Well, after they've been to a conference like this, and there have been 2 so far, they get it. And they've told me, when I go back to my county, I'm putting into practice what I kind of understood. I'm putting it into practice when I get back. So hopefully we're going to see a lot more of them putting it into practice. Gun Owners of America will be standing there with them. By the way, I've got membership information over on the table and some of our newsletters that we send out. So if you'd like to support our work and join Gun Owners of America, we'd be glad to have some patriots from this county working with us as we do our work in Washington. Thanks very much.
I just want to take a minute and just thank you all for coming. Please visit South Mountain Firearms, our sponsor for today. Stop by and talk to them here. Go visit them at their store.